My name is Chris. My story begins in my final year of high school. I had 1 year left before graduating and heading to university. I had friends, and our bond was so strong that people thought we were siblings. We went daily to cafes and gaming halls. When exam time came, I was mentally exhausted. My mother supervised my studies and tests obsessively, day and night, to ensure I earned high marks and got into the major they wanted for me, Hebrew translation, because it was highly sought after at the time. My father went to look for universities that taught Hebrew, but here came the shock. There were no universities offering Hebrew courses, only small institutes specializing in basic levels. My father asked his friends about this matter, and they advised him to send me to America, where the universities were excellent. My father returned home, his face filled with joy, and told me he would send me to America. I felt happy, too, because I loved the idea of traveling and experiencing a new country. However, my mother's reaction was one of disapproval. After much struggle, my father, uncles, and I managed to convince her that this was my future. 5 days later, I packed my travel belongings, said goodbye to my family and relatives, boarded the plane, and set off for America.
I had just arrived in America and entered the room I had booked in New York. The first 2 hours were tough. I felt lonely and uneasy. I spoke with my parents, assuring them everything was fine, but I was actually unsettled. My father's friend in America took me to the university, which lifted my spirits a bit. I thought the university dorm would be better than this accommodation, and that I'd make new friends. However, my excitement wavered when I saw the university's living arrangements. The people were incredibly diverse, coming from various nationalities, and the rule was that 2 people shared one room. I won't lie, I felt better when I started talking to my roommate, Stave. I began asking him about his life and why he came here. We chatted and then went down for dinner. Afterward, I was taken aback when Steve brought his friend Sonny into the room. It was allowed for anyone to bring a friend to the rooms, but everyone had to sleep in their respective rooms by bedtime. I didn't mind the idea and stayed in my bed, distant from them. Every day, Steve's friend would come to the room, and I grew uncomfortable with him. One day, Steve's friend entered the room and, to my shock, pulled a piece of hashish from his pocket. They started using it right in front of me. I was stunned. I was my first time witnessing such a scene.
After that, I went to sleep, and Steve's friend left. I didn't talk to him at all. The next day, when we went to have breakfast, I told Steve I wanted to talk to him about something. I came to advise him that what they were doing last night wasn't good. Steve's face turned 180 degrees, and he got very upset. I knew that if I stayed in the room with him, it would lead to problems between us. I went to the head of the department and told him I didn't want to share a room with anyone. He said that it was against university policy, since 2 people had to share a room. He said my only option was to take a room and pay for 2 beds in it. I agreed to the idea because I came here to study, not to create problems. I moved into a new room to sleep alone, but I didn't know I would regret this decision. Specifically, that I would be sleeping alone. The room was good, but the floor supervisor was not. She was a woman of about 60, with a perpetually grim expression and a very dry, unfriendly manner. I stayed this way for 3 days. After that, I began to lose things from my room. Every day I lost something, like my books. I searched the whole room for them, and when I returned, I found them in their place. I felt someone was doing this to make me hate the place.
I went to the supervisor and told her I wanted to watch the security footage to see who was entering my room. To my shock, I saw no one enter my room. 2 days later, I had a terrifying nightmare. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling chills all over my body. I looked at my door and found it wide open, even though I was certain I had locked it before going to sleep. I closed the door again and went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The next night, I locked my door before going to bed and placed the key under my pillow. As I slept, I felt an unnatural heat fill the room, as if someone was there. I woke up, but found no one. I looked under the door and saw a pair of feet standing behind it, waiting for something from me. I turned on the lights and ran to open the door, but to my shock, no one was there. I felt that someone was bothering me and didn't want me to stay. The next day, I changed the lock on my door. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of the bathroom sink running, and the faucet was open. I was sure I had closed it before going to sleep. I didn't pay much attention and turned it off before going back to sleep. The next morning, I also woke up to the sound of running water from the faucet. I was sure I had closed it because I checked before going to sleep, thinking I had forgotten to close it the night before. I said to myself, is it possible that someone could enter the room while I am asleep? The next day, I couldn't sleep because of the fear. It was around 1 o'clock when I finally managed to sleep and woke up at 3 to the sound of breaking glass. I woke up quickly and went to the kitchen and found plates broken on the floor. At that moment, I started to lose my mind who opened the cupboard and broke the plates. The next day, I went to university and attended many lectures. I came back home very tired and slept deeply. However, I woke up at the same usual time, 3 o'clock, to the sound of someone playing with the room's lights. I woke up and turned on my phone's flashlight, but found no one. I decided not to sleep and sat with my phone to review some lessons, and then I heard the sound of a little girl crying. The sound was coming from the bathroom. I said, "Who is in the bathroom?" No one answered, and the sound suddenly stopped. I was scared to go to the bathroom to see who was there. I remained in this state for a week every day, waking up to strange sounds. I felt something strange in the room in front of mine. The light switches on at 3 o'clock every day. I went to ask the person what he is doing at this time. The person was from Turkey named Habib, and he was a good person. We sat and talked for a while. Habib suggested we sleep together. I was elated because I had been feeling scared lately. When we slept in my room, nothing unusual happened, and my anxiety eased a bit. The next day, I slept alone again, and strange things happened as usual. I went to Habib and asked him if he could sleep with me in the same room. He agreed, and nothing peculiar occurred that night. The following morning, we had breakfast together and then went to the university. I returned to my room later to sleep alone again. At around 1 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the bathroom. A few minutes later, I heard the tap turn on. I quickly called Habib and asked him to come over. When he arrived, the noises stopped completely. I felt deeply embarrassed. Habib was puzzled by my behavior and left shortly after. I sat on my bed wondering why these things only happen when I'm alone. A month passed, and the situation went from bad to worse. One night, I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. I turned on the light and found my mirror shattered on the floor, as if someone had broken it. I lay in bed, thinking about how I would convince her that it broke by itself and that I didn't break it. I fell asleep without realizing it. I woke up in the morning and was shocked. I looked at the mirror's glass, and it was in place and not broken. I knew it was a dream, but when I stood on my feet, I was shocked again. There was a wound on my leg. I began to think if it was a dream, why was my leg injured? I felt more afraid. I started going to university distracted. Signs of fatigue began to appear on my face. One day I stood in front of the mirror looking at my pale face. and when I started focusing, I found someone standing behind me. His features were distorted. I turned around and found nothing. I felt as if I was hallucinating. I went to my bed and slept deeply. I woke up and didn't go to my lecture at the university. I was very scared. I called my parents and told them everything. My mother and father were shocked by what happened to me and felt angry because I slept alone. They told me, "This happens to you because you sleep alone." I regretted not telling my family about this. They told me to look for a roommate to sleep with in the same room. The next day, I went to Habib and asked him if we could sleep in the same room. He agreed with the idea. After that, nothing happened to me. 2 years passed, and I finished learning Hebrew, and I returned to my country. I felt sad because I would miss Habib. I returned to my hometown and felt happy, as if I was born again. I sat thinking about how I overcame all these things that happened to me. I learned a lesson I will never forget in my life. Never sleep alone.